I'm going to start with a quick introduction. Um, so again, welcome everybody. Joey Connect here, one of the senior leaders with a company named Proteus and our flagship product Engage, which you will see a little bit of it today because it's actually the genesis of how we know all of this information I'm about to share with you here. But quick introduction. Again, Joey Connect, senior leader. We're headquartered out of the Lincoln, Nebraska area. So if you're ever making your way through LNK, please don't hesitate to stop by. Beautiful little town. It's not that bad. 300,000 people, not that small, but encourage you to check it out. A couple of other things. I've been with the firm 24 years. We have a platform called Proteus Engage, which if you signed up for this webinar, you probably were on our website or through one of our channels. You probably knew that already. And like I said, I'll talk about why, and we know all this information is because we've been helping companies penetrate enterprise for that last 25% of the sale and onboarding for years. So look forward to sharing with you some of the tips, tricks. I am going to share 10 secrets today related to that and get this party started here. A couple of overarching notes. One, at the conclusion of this, you will get this video in case you have to drop off. I know some of the people had noted in their registration that they weren't going to make it today. So part of our normal process is to follow up with not only the recording, but any other additional resources, because I frequently talk about additional resources in these webinars, and then we'll follow up with you. And then I do offer one-to-one consultations, leader to leader. I'm not going to sell you on anything, but some of our people who attend these webinars are just really trying to get into enterprise. Some of you might be OGs in the enterprise. But if you're even an OG or a new, ultimately, sometimes it's just nice to brainstorm with somebody through a problem you're having or an opportunity you're trying to working through, and whether that our platform solves that or not, or you're looking for additional resources or just ideas. I offer up those one-on-one consultations post all webinars. So look forward to if anybody needs that, please don't hesitate to do that, and I'll show you how to do that at the end of the presentation. I think you guys have all signed up for the 4.5-hour session today, so we will take 9 bathroom breaks, and just giving you a heads up on that. Or this will be about 40 minutes. You choose which way you want this one to go down. So appreciate everybody's time. If you've been, some of you have been on some of my other webinars. One of the things you'll know is our style is typically fun. I talk about a lot of things. I get into details just because I try to create in these. Everybody on this call is obviously a successful business person, and so I try to share kind of meaningful challenges or opportunities and kind of show for real how we're doing it, because it's very important, obviously, to have strong takeaways from any educational moment. So as you know, the title, Winning Enterprise Clients, Proven Strategies to Close Deals and Exceed Onboarding Expectations, kind of a straightforward title, but not a straightforward problem, right? So again, all of you are some capacity involved in enterprise closing the deal and or onboarding them. And quite frankly, they're kind of merged together. If you watched or listened to some of our other webinars, I was literally just on with another client 4 minutes ago before we just jumped onto this, and a large group selling into healthcare. And if you're doing any kind of enterprise hunting, you guys know in order to properly price, quote, do everything, the relationship in that last 25% of the sale is very intimate. You need to know a lot of things from the client, a lot of people involved in that process to make it right and to get consensus. And then that has to then go through the handoff and then into the onboarding, right? So it's a lot of people, a lot of players there if you've been selling an enterprise. If you're new, that's something you're going to learn today, and ways to win at that, because it is very, very complex and typically has a longer sales cycle and sometimes even longer onboarding schedules. And so we'll kind of break into these things throughout this presentation just to kind of help everybody align. So how I'm going to frame today, framing probably not what you expected at the beginning, but I'm going to tell you this is what we're going to break through first. So one of the major contexts or challenges of selling into enterprise is actually not understanding the enterprise. And so we work obviously with tons of clients and of course have our own enterprise clients. And I like to start out with why it's so hard. So many of you might sell into SMB, small business, mid cap, different enterprise levels. But when you start getting into enterprise or large project deployments, because it always doesn't have to just necessarily be a company that's doing more than maybe 500 million in top line revenue. It's also maybe if you're offering or professional services are highly complex, the actual buyer, while they're interested in what you're doing and clearly they're buying your product to solve a problem, there are overarching massive fears within the organization. Um, if anybody here has been involved in a company with an ERP deployment, right, enterprise resource planning, a software infrastructure, the old joke was whoever, you know, owned that project in the company within a year is either fired or now president, right? And so it's not really a joke, but it sounds kind of funny. Why that is an enterprise hunting and deploying. There's a tremendous amount of fears and risks that the organizations um, take on, and I'm going to go through 5 of these here because why they're important to understand these is they are the actual sub fears or the things they're not going to tell you necessarily during the experience. And so you need to know these so that during your closing of the deal and the onboarding, you're addressing these in a way that lowers the risk for them, improves the spirit of the transaction, and ultimately, obviously, makes you a successful, vendor. And when I say vendor here, bear with me here. Whether you're selling software, professional services, you're an MSP, a blend of that, I don't really care. We have clients that are doing all sorts of different things with the enterprise, and these are the underlying fears that enterprise have about bringing on new products and services into their organization. Now, with that said, uh, you're also talking about a tremendous amount of stakeholders. And so when you're selling into the enterprise, it's not uncommon to have 30 different stakeholders on that transaction, which might be the original exec team that you were working with, operations, compliance, contracting, IT, of course, for IT concerns, right? So as you think about getting into selling into enterprise, and again, my assumption here is you're not selling $1,000 widget. You're selling something of larger value, which needed that much collaboration in enterprise sales. But ultimately, in enterprise sales, you're going to have a massive amount of different stakeholders, and they all bring their own risk and perceptions to the transaction. So this is going to be something, whatever you're doing, you really need to take this into consideration because that is going to blow up some, or your deals go what you might call dark, or you're getting ghosted, or nothing is happening. All these types of things. You're going to probably start to understand why maybe that is happening here. So let's start breaking these down. And like I said, I got about 5 of these, and then I'm going to summarize the 5, and then I'm going to show you basically 10 things that enterprise clients wish you were doing or hope you would do well to offset these fears. Okay. And so that's where we're going to get to at the end of this. But I think it's fundamental you understand what they're thinking and how they're thinking. And then we come up and I'll share with you the 10. Now, the 10 solutions that we have to here to these, obviously we know this because we've been at this for more than 10 years of working with clients in this kind of ecosystem. So this is all learned from the field. And so I'm sharing, and of course our solution helps with these. So I'll show high level, but again, I hope you become an engaged customer, but if you don't, that's fine. Hopefully you can still grow your business or solve any problems that you're working against, right? So let's get at it. It's been on the screen for a little bit. So enterprise fears, the first 2. So again, as you're selling your services in, we're going to start here at the service level of selling. Again, conceptually, for most people we know who are selling into enterprise, again, with a meaningful product, you're going to be going through their purchase process, right? And so you're going to have a lot of stakeholders, lots of things. So this is what they're really worried about right out the gate. And I didn't put these in a specific order, but I kind of grouped them in some ways, but we'll walk through them. So poor integration or operational disruption. So they're panicking that whatever your platform or services you're going to do is going to disrupt anything that is going on already or initiatives that are already going on there. So if you're on this call and you're selling software, massive item of consideration. Not to put sales down, I've been in sales I am 48, but sales Obviously, sometimes during the qualification process, might be making promises or things, and then at the end of the day, it didn't add out exactly at the end for the proposal and or the onboarding. So you got to trust but verify, and obviously really work against knocking down those fears. Okay. The second one, limited vendor support and service reliability. Again, this is for anybody in kind of the software or MSP or blended services. This is going to be another real risk area that they're thinking about the entire time. And again, we'll get to how you can start to address these. Whoops, too fast. Oh, I actually was on the wrong slide. No one called me out. Let's flip back. So fear of financial loss and hidden costs. Okay, so what does this really mean? Well, this means they are concerned that during your sales process, maybe I's and T's aren't correctly done, right? No pun intended there with IT. But ultimately, they're not sure, does your solution or service or whatever you're offering actually going to work? One, and two, how much do I not know? What I don't know can kill me, right? Or kill the project or kill the opportunity. And so there's a lot of dancing around and risks, which means again, this is why a lot of deals and onboardings go to die. About 12% of enterprise onboardings die during onboarding. So super high risk still at that point in time. And a lot of this, which I'll summarize here in a minute, is all related to actually a not a clean and consistent information sharing and communication and collaboration during the sales process, the handoff, and the onboarding, right? Because there's just a massive amount of stakeholders and there's a lot of miscommunication and expectation management that goes sideways, right? So again, these are things you have to be thinking about what they're deeply concerned about, because ultimately you're being taken through a journey of their purchasing process, how these companies want to purchase items. And if at any one of these states or stages of that process you falter to deliver and to knock down these fears and be able to support those fears, you're out. Like you're just out. They don't have time. And so, yes, enterprise sales takes a long period of time. Onboardings take a long period of time, but typically, obviously, they're very good financially. But you have to do it right, or you will get knocked out left and right from those transactions. All right. Um, Big topic now. If you're doing anything with an enterprise, no matter what, is going to be risk and compliance violations. So anything from the security side, you need to have nip and tuck. This is going to involve typically conversations between your engineers and their engineers and all sorts of SOC 2 compliance, ISO, HIPAA, you name it. We do a lot in healthcare and other regulated industries. In those transactions, the number one decider basically of whether or not your platform is going to get bought and or deployed is that group. So think about that for a second. The purchaser is IT, even though it's not an IT product. And so apply that to your sales process and your onboarding. And all of a sudden you might find some pretty large gaping holes. The other element related to that and the one above of the hidden cost is a lot of the times, and we were just literally talking to a client about this literally, and during the sales process, a lot of times in an enterprise sales, you will deal with or be working with the enterprise team members of the company, right? So you're selling into making this up, again, apply it to your own, the VP of operations or the VP of sales or whoever you're dealing with within your organization, typically an enterprise, is some sort of C-suite or large upper tier decision makers, right? What you're not also considering during that period of time is making sure you're getting the aggregate feedback also from the average user of your platform and or service within the organization. That delta of selling top level and not getting buy-in from the bottom level also will kill the deal and kill the onboarding. Maybe some of you have been there where a company has purchased your solution and then you get introduced to the people who are going to be using it and they basically kill the deal or kill the onboarding, or they're like, why are we even talking to you? This really isn't our problem. Our problem is this, and that's not even your solution, right? So there's a large delta there of information, and you need to make sure during the sales process that is looped in. And that is not only for qualifying the sale and the pricing everything effectively, but also dramatically helps the onboarding and success of the overall. So again, don't miss those key points. And these are all wrapped into the fears of the average enterprise company nowadays. I mean, if you're doing this already, you're like, yep, Joe, totally got it. If you haven't been selling an enterprise and you're just looking to break into this, these are many things you have to be thinking about that, quite frankly, have nothing to do with your product, service, or offering. It's the process that you execute with enterprise customers that builds that trust and confidence during all of these stages of that. Because any wrinkle there will completely dismiss you, not only from this opportunity, but probably any other opportunity within that enterprise moving forward. So again, think of it from their perspective, less than your perspective of, hey, I want to sell you something, and hey, I want to get you live. You have to understand their fear set is heavily driving their decisions. Okay. I had flipped the slides. I apologize. The operational, we went through that, service, and then fear of poor adoption and organizational resistance. Okay. This maps exactly to what I was just sharing with you, is if you sell enterprise or to the C-suite, and then the actual users, there's massive resistance there, right? And poor adoption. I don't think this is a shocker to anybody, because you're probably in one of the companies that is experiencing this right now. Everybody talks about Salesforce. We use Salesforce. Many of you probably use Salesforce, but 75% of Salesforce deployments fail. And you can Google that. Actually, it's not just Salesforce. CRMs in general, only 25 to 30% are scored as great deployments. And why is that? Well, leadership says, yes, we're going to deploy it because it will be great to have all of our customer information in one place. Problem is, the people who actually need to be doing that work aren't considered in that purchasing program or purchasing decision, and or many other things, behavioral change, etc. Right? So you can kind of see this is where, especially in enterprise hunting, you got to be very, very careful to make sure you're harmonizing both stories, an ROI model for the leadership, but then operational level excellence and ROI to the daily users. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So you have both stories to tell, which is going to dramatically help with all the risks that are out there. And because they're like, well, why are we going to spend 800,000 on blank? Well, there has to be an overarching organizational benefit. And then, of course, to get adoption, there has to be what's in it for me, as many of you might be thinking yourself, right? Like, what's in it for me? Like, how is this going to help us and not just help the company? And it might be the same thing, but how it's framed, how it's communicated, and when that's done during the sales process, and of course, during the onboarding is extremely critical, right? So you can see these are generalized fears, of course. Many of these came from surveys and interactions with our customers and our customers' customers, and we're knee deep in this every single day. So those are their overarching fears, really sans what product or service you actually might provide. But those fears are the exact things you need to be concerned about, because you need to obviously omit those fears and at least manage them as best as humanly possible during an enterprise sales. Does this happen, of course, on small business? Of course, but there's less money and risk typically on the line. When you're getting into an enterprise sale, your cost of sale, customer acquisition cost, CAC, is going to be pretty substantial, right? So you're putting out a pretty big footprint of money to be having these meetings, designing. Many of you need subject matter experts or estimation groups involved, right? Like many of you, there's at least 7 to 10 people on your side that have to be involved in order to complete an enterprise sale itself. So the amount of capital outlay is pretty high. And of course, they have a lot of risk in these transactions. And so you're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. So you're making, obviously, the most amount of money that your group can make, right? So what does this really all boil down? If you look at and you think about those fears that we just went through, what does that really mean? Like, okay, so great, I understand they're worried about all of these things, right? But how do I solve that, or how do I mitigate these risks? Well, it's like any relationship, right? Whether it's a business relationship, an enterprise relationship, or me and my wife, right? It all boils down to communication, collaboration, and trying to drive a great experience, right? Because let's just own it here. We can't omit all problems, but if there are problems, it's a lot easier to work through them when there's a lot of transparency and a lot of communication around that, right? And historically and traditionally, in all of these opportunities, whether you're the seller or the buyer or the seller, obviously, and the onboarding, it all comes down to, are we working together to get this over the line, and are we being as visible, as high as the amount of visibility and candidness can we have? And then let's communicate this and really carry this over the line. And so really all of these things is the fears all come from the unknown. So how do we mitigate the unknown as much as possible when you're closing an enterprise transaction, and obviously, onboarding them, or a lot of stuff obviously has to happen during the handoff. So I'm going to shift gears now, understand these. Of course, I'll share these out and just quiz your teams. That's what I always say. What I do with these kinds of things, just as a sidebar here, we do a lot of pre-mortems. If you're not familiar, you might have heard me on some other webinars talk about pre-mortems. But when you're going to go hunt an enterprise client, what are the pre-mortems? It's, let's identify all the failures we possibly can before we even go after them. And I do this typically in a team exercise. It's not just you, it's your teams. And let's identify and use those fears. And it will help identify any additional gaps or, deltas you might have with your team and or sales, the marketing, the onboarding team, whatever it might be. If the expectations are this, where do we see we could fail around that? And that means you can fix it before it becomes a problem. So I would do that, and I would do a pre-mortem probably in the next 20 minutes. You're going to see the 10 things you should be doing, and really this is what enterprise clients are asking for, and then do a delta on that and see where your gaps are. And then, of course, that is going to help then plug those holes so that you have a better chance, of winning and obviously onboarding at the end of the day. All right. So let's shift gears. You might want to get pens and papers out, but I am going to share this. I'm going to do 10 of the things that the clients are looking for, enterprise clients. Again, I really don't care about you, not in a negative way, because it's all about how does the enterprise client feel? How do they feel the process is going? How do they know the process is going well? And then obviously that helps generate more opportunities. So I'm going to do 5 at a time. And as I go through the 5, I'm going to share with you just how we do that. Again, love to have a conversation, but also if maybe your business isn't the right fit or whatever, you can take these things back and adjust things that you're doing today. All right. So let's jump into it. We'll do 5 at a time. So the 10 secret desires. So again, where these kind of come from, it would be nice to say, oh, we just, came up with all these ourselves. No. Just for a fun fact, so some of you might want to know, some of you know us and our current clients and other things, but so let's just start how Engage started. So our product Engage started because clients of ours were complaining that they were being sold to and onboarded by their other vendors, because originally our company, we just built custom products. We really weren't doing any sales or onboarding, right? And so basically we had a ton of enterprise clients complain to us, and they said, Joe and your team, can you guys come up with a solution to just make this a lot better, because this is pretty frustrating. And if I'm 48, any of you who are on this call that are, right around my age, even a little bit younger, like I used to sell enterprise deal, couple million, no problem, maybe meet with 5 people. And those days are just gone. We have deals that have 30 plus people on them, right? And so times have just changed. Consensus decision making has changed. So a lot of things have changed. So basically, our clients and our ventures started complaining. And so what I did is I sold the concept, what is now our product Engage today, to 15 of our clients, and we worked with them to build out a purpose-built solution to solve this problem. And so what I'm sharing with you here, yes, logically our product does it, but why does our product do that? Is because this is what the clients needed and this is what they want. So you now understand their fears, and then I'm going to show you how they want to be communicated to, how do they want to build a relationship with your teams, and how does that get over the line in an efficient way for your group now to be successful. So just from a mindset perspective, that's why I'm showing you both sides of the equation here. So first one, what I'm going to do here, just for fun fact, I'm going to go through all 5 and then show you the 5, and then we'll do the next 5 here. And then of course take notes, but I'll share this out because some of these have another layer or level underneath them. So 1, centralized and secure environment to do all of this. if you're selling into healthcare or financial services, you already know this is happening. Large amounts of hospitals have actually shut down getting email from outside people. Email is dying in the next 5 years in the enterprise. Email will only work between the same people in the same company. You will not, as an external person, be able to email um, your prospect and or your client. That's just the fact. It's coming. If you don't believe me, Google it and you will see, because it's already happening. So in order to facilitate communication and collaboration during the end part of the sales process, why I call it the last 25% of the sales process, is basically, it's like when you were dating somebody, no one really cares until you say you're going to get married, and then everybody gets involved. So that's why I say the last 25% of the sales process, right? Like, it's just, that's when a lot of the relationships come in all the way through to onboarding. So you need to have it in a centralized environment for all this stuff. Why that is two is collaboration and risk management, right? So there's a lot of compliance out there, a lot of communication stuff. Um, Ultimately, you need to be sharing data and information, all sorts of stuff. So it's very, very important that everything is in one secure, centralized environment that your team internally can get to, but then also you're working with many stakeholders on obviously the client side, because this has to happen for proper quoting, proper handoff, and of course the actual onboarding. So wide and deep collaboration, file sharing, documentation, all sorts of stuff, right? So you need to think about your environment around this. If anybody is on the call with their sales hat on, the biggest factor during these enterprise sales too is equipping the internal stakeholder with the proper materials to penetrate the enterprise. So again, when you're selling into the enterprise in that last 25%, that internal champion, the person you've been working with the entire time, now needs to open this up to 7 to 10 more people, at least on their internal side, to become part of the sales process. And you need to give him or her the tools to effectively do this. And most importantly, position your solution, project, offering, whatever you're doing, in the right way. So many times groups are effectively selling to the stakeholder, but when the stakeholder, or the champ, your champ, goes to inside his or her organization, they get beat down real quick because people are like, no, we already have something like that, or that sucks, or whatever. You guys all know, like, the deal is getting lost because him or her is not equipped to fight the fight for you internally. And so if you have everything in a secure environment that she can share or he can share out, positioning your solution correctly because you've done your qualification correctly, and ROI and all these other things you're able to share, your business cases, basically, you have a much better fighting chance to win. And that's usually heavily missed from somebody who is used to selling small business to mid cap. You're selling directly to the buyer, where a lot of times in enterprise, you might be 6 months away from actually meeting the person who's going to cut the check. But in that 6 month gap, everything is lost because your team failed to empower the stakeholder, and that's ghosting at its best in the enterprise. So you really need to be thinking about that, because by the time certain stakeholders get involved, they want everything kind of prepared to a level where they can make an effective decision. They don't want to be sold, they just want to know the outcomes. Okay. Continuing in that relationship process, a lot of our enterprise clients really, really complain to us about the handoff. So think about this. So in an enterprise deal, no matter who tells you what, you don't sell enterprise deals fast. Everybody would say, "Oh, we just slam dunk an enterprise, no big deal." It just doesn't happen, because the enterprises themselves have their own systems and beating hearts, and you can move it a little bit faster, and you can multi-thread, which we help with, but ultimately it's their choice of progress. But what happens is that's typically anywhere from 6 months to a year. Now, during that initial phases that I've been talking about, you're collecting a lot of information, getting to know the organization, getting to know their problems, their challenges, their business cases. And then all of that, in many companies, they don't understand, gets lost or is not organized correctly, so that when the handoff comes on, the enterprise customer feels like they're starting all over again. And it's really dangerous if you have to start all over again. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you've spent most of the time selling to the executives and nobody who's actually going to be deploying it and actually using the tool, it creates a tremendous amount of friction and stalling, because now you're meeting the people and they're like, why are we doing this? What's going on here? And your teams might have zero information or really come across as they have no idea what they're doing. Really, really dangerous. Um, I, Really, really, I just cannot express how so many companies think of sales as just sales, or SMEs are there. And then after the deal is sold, they're kind of gone. Maybe the original rep is there, but all of the artifacts, the why, all of that is being re-asked literally and re-questioned. And it just destroys the spirit of the expectation of the experience. It's a big red dot. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. Like it's kind of like this just sidebar thing, like, oh, we sold the deal. Yay. Everybody goes out, has a beer. It's awesome. Everything's great. And kind of the spirit kind of sometimes drops off, but it's again mission critical. A lot of deals are lost in enterprise at that handoff and in the onboarding. And yeah, just it's a huge red dot item. I cannot express how you need to consider that a very serious piece. Or, don't tell me you're going to have the sales rep join the first call for a half hour and call that a handoff. So many groups do that. Like it's just insulting. Like you've been selling me for a year and then Bobby's on the call for a half hour and that's good enough. Like I don't think so. Like there's a lot more information that needs to be graciously transferred and expectations matched. Okay. The fifth one, ironic, expectations match, right? And communication management. So in the enterprise, there's a lot of transient people, meaning they're in the project, they're out of the project, they're in the project, they're out of the project, or the onboarding. And so a lot of this all kind of comes around making sure that there are clear expectations and communication during that last part of the sale, the handoff, and the onboarding environment, right? So that's mission critical here. And I note it there, and I assume many of you believe in these philosophies, but a lot of times this is considered basically a mutual plan in the process to help guide them along. So with those first five, I'm going to jump out here just to give you a whistle, just a quick look, because it will bring to life for you guys quite a few things. So just 30,000 foot. This is what our product is. It's called Proteus Engage. At the core, we create centralized workspaces that this is customer facing. So we're selling into a hospital here, and we take them through proven processes to execute all of the things I've been talking to you about. This is where we're plugging those spheres and plugging that with highly interactive and high communication and collaboration experiences. So inside our tool set, we obviously have all of the people on the deal. And then we have all of these proven processes and templated libraries for checklists, demos, anything that you're doing. It's not a demo. I'm just giving you 30,000 foot. Why this is important, whether you're doing your discovery, your demo, all of this becomes that toolbox, obviously, for that internal champ, like I was talking about. This is the battle box that your champ takes into you. If you're in sales on this call, 80-90% of the sale is done without you in the room. The internal champ is doing it. So equip him or her with the right tools to win, right? So we create these highly collaborative environments to do that. We do a ton of mutual plans, file sharing, data capture, calendars, all the things you need to be equipping those champions with to move that deal across, and also heavy for the handoff periods also. So we do a tremendous amount of stuff related to onboarding and handoffs, which could be internal facing only, and then also customer facing on certain elements. So all of these are integrated into repeatable, scalable processes inside our tool, integrated with Slack and Teams, your email, and of course, your CRMs. Just showing you high level to kind of bring it to life. At the end of the day, when you're dealing with an enterprise, you better have everything in one environment so everybody can be kept up to date during those experiences and the different phases. But you also want to do that efficiently, and that's what we do there. Okay. So switching back to the second five, excuse me, talking nonstop, as you can tell. Native New Yorker too. I talk fast, so that's why we do the videos. All right. So the second five core things, which kind of again were the underpinning of our solution and our success, is we talked about sales, equipping the people correctly, that last 25%, penetrating the account, obviously getting it to a certain point. Don't screw up the handoff. I don't want to. Now that you know that, if you knew that already, improve it. If you didn't know it, you're welcome. That you're going to lose a ton of momentum on that handoff. And then provide proven onboarding experiences. So what I mean by that is one size doesn't fit all for all your clients. Typically, the next one is the flexibility of customization. So there's two things here. So you want to have a repeatable, scalable, measurable process, like I was just showing you, checklist, tasks, all this stuff, communication, videos, all this common ways of onboarding a client. That's going to build a lot of trust with the enterprise, right? Because you're telling them what needs to be done. Another big hidden thing on onboarding a client is clients don't know what they don't know. So enterprise clients really are just not looking for your solution. They're looking for best practices and ways to improve their the outcomes. So a lot of the times onboarding kind of becomes more like artificially kind of a configuration experiment or kind of just the facts, Jack, right? But when in reality, a lot of times the customers are not just looking to be onboarded, they're looking for best practices or better ways to do things. So sometimes in onboarding, companies get kind of sucked into, we better do this fast because we want to get the quarterly revenue for whatever, blah, 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 blah. You guys all know, right? But ultimately, your onboarding experience, please consider the client doesn't know what they don't know. And we see it so often is what the clients are really looking for is, yes, not only your solution, whether it's a project, a piece of software, hardware, whatever, anything. It's also, well, tell me how I should be doing it or better ways to leverage it, right? And sometimes that's in phases too. So a lot of times when you're selling into the enterprise, things are broken out. Instead of taking on, I call it, instead of boiling the ocean, you boil a pot of water. A lot of times clients want to incrementally work with you because again, they don't trust you yet. So you better knock this out. But also, whatever you're providing, make sure it's just not black and white. You're actually helping them do things better. And that's a big piece. They don't know what they don't know. And a lot of times, if you're deploying, especially like software, some other things, if you deploy it the way that they're doing it, yes, there might be some benefits, but could there be 10x more benefits by deploying it, by presenting a different experience or way to do it? Like sometimes onboarding is just considered get them set up, and it really isn't just getting them set up. It might be reworking things. And so again, pre-mortem that with your team. Oops. Right. In enterprise, everything is about 70% correct. So that means they all think they're different, and they are. And that means 30% needs to be kind of probably changed out or the perception of change. It really isn't. We all have probably heard that, like, oh, we're so different than everybody else, right? Like, or whatever. Like, we have bank clients, like, we're so different than everybody else. Well, it's banking. It can't be that different, as far as I know. There are rules, right? It's a joke. But the point is try to have processes that are fixed and rigid, but then also working from kind of a customizable 30% of that experience, right? This is very important, especially with like integrations, as we talked earlier. That's one of the greatest fears is that integrations don't live up to the claim. But ultimately, remember that every single one of them is about 70% should try to be repeatable and scalable. And then that other 30% can still be scalable, but it's going to be ad hoc per client per se, or the environment, right? Um, the other thing here goes back to a common theme I've been talking about is clear visibility on progress. There's multiple stakeholders on progress, right? So again, when you go into onboarding, you have the people you're actually onboarding with, but a lot of companies forget about the original check cutters and the original purchasers. And so making sure you keep that visibility not only to that leadership team in an abstract way through the platform, and then also obviously communication and collaboration with the direct um, onboarding team members that you're working with there. If you're selling into enterprise and deploying with enterprise, we highly recommend you go with ROI focused strategies. Again, why this is important is a lot of times you are going to be pushed into let's dip our toes in this and phase. So phasing comes in. Well, how do you get to phase two if phase one is crap or it took too long or isn't providing value? So a lot of times you got to do these ROI focused strategies. And what I mean by that is when you're onboarding, you make sure your onboarding experience and what you onboard first is going to help you prove your business case relatively fast so you get great momentum. So you go from phase one to phase two very, very quickly, right? Or phase one, you know what I'm getting at. Might have said that wrong, but everybody knows what I'm getting at. So really think about that also in that, and that ROI is at the average user level and of course the exec level, because that's when more budgets get unleashed for you to continue that relationship. But those ROI focused strategies have to be woven into the conversation during onboarding. And during, obviously they were during sales, but frequently it gets kind of lost in the mix when you're actually doing the handoff and the onboarding. And so making sure those clear expectations are out there all the time is very, very critical. All right. And then the other piece that enterprise clients have completely complained about when they've been sold something and onboarding in it, is like the tiger team effect. I don't care what you call it. But is what are you doing after the first 120 days? There's other webinars I've done and other resources. The first 120 days is where churn comes from. Um, it's the onboarding process in the first 120 days. And so if they don't renew after a 1 year contract, if you have a 1 year contract and they don't renew, more than likely that decision was clearly made within the first 120 days of launch. And that's because you either poorly onboard them, set the wrong expectations, didn't hit the ROI focus strategies, any of the things I've talked about here, or any of those 5 fears that we went through at the beginning got triggered during any of these processes. That's why they do not renew. Um, and it's very, very dangerous for a lot of organizations because, again, just like the sales, you sell it, ring, the gong, the bell, yay, everybody go out, have a beer. Same thing with onboarding. Everybody gets real excited. Client is live, yay, ring the bell, go have a beer. But the real differentiation comes in that first 120 days. Are they comfortable using it? The adoption. Remember that fear I talked about of adoption, all that stuff. Everybody knows if they don't adopt, it doesn't matter. All this other effort was fruitless. And so you want to make sure the onboarding is correct, but then that first 120 days, sticking with the client, making sure having heightened support teams, having heightened communication, weekly check-in meetings, all those types of things to really drive that. Reports related to your ROI and measurement. Again, not only to the people who are using the tool, but also the executive team members that obviously purchase the product. So again, pick and choose your use case around that. Obviously, from what we recommend, obviously, and we know works extremely well, obviously, because we're in that, is running everything inside that centralized environment, like we talked about. Post-launch surveying, very, very critical. If you're not doing satisfaction stuff, checkpoints, things of that nature, definitely add that to your list as something to do. Obviously, training, and then, of course, performance management and having meetings with the stakeholders about your business case that you originally had with them, which obviously can be converted into, we do a ton of QBRs or other things. I wouldn't recommend quarterly business reviews. It's too much high volume to the executive suite and enterprise, one a year typically to the high enterprise, but other check-in points. But you can always be sharing performance data with them. See, that's the difference of having meetings and not, is when you have a centralized environment, you can be continuously sharing value and performance information, and the individuals can get in on demand whenever they want to, so that they can see that you guys are driving an impact with them, which is very, very critical to maintaining that relationship, especially if you're cross-selling or moving into other phases of the relationship. And again, with our tool, this is just a sample. Obviously, we do this in many different ways for different clients, but at the core, those 10 concepts that I just went through here, these are exactly, trust me, every day, this is the conversation. These 10 elements are what they wish you were doing when you're selling into them and handing off and onboarding with them there. These are critical. This is the playbook to achieve that. So please, I'll share these with you. There's obviously some lower level things, other concepts like I talked about, mutual action plans, clear communication and updates, rhythm around all of that is very, very important. Because again, you're not going to sell into an enterprise and onboard an enterprise without having problems, right? Like that's the reality. So we want to mitigate the problems as much as possible, ensure high relationship, and then keeping that visibility on all fronts to make sure that there's success on that project. And it's so critical in a deal that is for the enterprise. So to summarize, I just kind of put together, it's a mutual dance at the end of the day. But it's a mutual dance at many different levels within the organization. But ultimately, it's providing those guided experiences for the stakeholders, like we talked about. Like it has to be repeatable and measurable, so you know everything that is going on. It has to be obviously highly collaborative, so that everybody knows what's going on, and we're not reinventing conversations. Or if you're selling in this, if you're an enterprise selling an enterprise, then you got double the amount of silos, right? And then, or if you're a vendor selling into enterprise, you got to remember your client is highly siloed. So how do you get that communication information across to all the key stakeholders? And you have to be fixed yet perceived adaptable. So they want to feel special, they want to feel catered, but you have to do that obviously in a way that still works for your organization and everybody isn't doing things can't run amok, right? And then what you got to do, and then how you make more money is obviously sustaining that momentum. Like I said, if you're selling an enterprise, a lot of the times it's going to be phased, or you're only selling into this department, and you're only selling into North America, and then you obviously want to penetrate the organization into other divisions and silos. That's how you make real money in the enterprise. Very rarely are you selling to the entire enterprise all at once. And so, how you break down those doors or create those additional revenue streams is obviously using the ROI business case metrics. And then, obviously, proof is in the pudding, right? Showing the value fast and engaging with the leadership of telling your story, because that's who's going to sell you to the other division or the global director or whatever it might be there, right? So, enterprises are making most of their decisions on efficiency and or obviously ROI kind of minded decisions there. So you have to match to how they purchase and install things. So, all right. Well, I appreciate the time. Hopefully you wrote down some nuggets here of knowledge. Of course, I'll be shipping this out. You can visit our website. There's tons of more webinars and white papers and stuff around all of these concepts, because this is what works. We know it. We see it every day. And if anybody wants to have just a candid conversation with myself, there's my email. And then I will obviously follow up from this with the recording and some other resources that I mentioned. And love to have a chat and just see if I can help you out or point you in a good direction. So again, appreciate the time. Hopefully your week is full of thanks and giving. And love to have you at our next event.